Okay, so I decided to do The Castle in the Attic, and it's by Elizabeth Winthrop. And the reason that I decided to do this one was because the fourth grade class that I'm in for my practicum is actually reading this book right now, so I thought that would be a cool thing to do. So I would start out, they would have already started this book, so I would start out and I would ask what they remembered, and they would say things like, William is the main character, who you can see on the front. Miss Phillips is the housekeeper, but she's moving back to England to take care of her sick brother. So William is having to deal with that in the story right now. Before she leaves, she gives William a present, which is this castle that's right in the middle. And it's seen to be a toy, but she also gives him a silver knight, which is going to have some significance. And then William appreciates it, but he's like, that's not going to make her stay. So that's what is happening so far. So we are on chapter 3. And I would have it on the smartboard just so the kids could like read along with me, say we didn't have like books or anything. And then also I just found an e-reading of it so they could have this on their Chromebooks because Chromebooks are becoming even more accessible. So starting with chapter 3. William lay in bed for a long time without sleeping. He heard the front door close gently. That's Mom. One more to go, he whispered to Bear, who lay beside him, dressed in William's old sweatshirt. William's mother was a pediatrician. She had evening office hours so that working parents could bring their children in for checkups. So, who takes me to checkups? William once asked. Mrs. Phillips, his mother replied. That's why I'm able to work. I know you're in good hands. William didn't answer because he knew that was true, but something about it gnawed at him. Last year, his mother had run for the school board, so now she had meetings after office hours twice a month, but that was all right too, because Mrs. Phillips was always there on weekends. William listened to the sounds his mother made as she moved through the house. Let's pretend we're asleep, he whispered to Bear. He lay still as he pulled his blankets up to his shoulders and tucked them under his chin. She leaned over and kissed him on the right temple. The smell of her perfume hung in the air as she'd left. The headlights of the second car swept across the ceiling as Dad pulled into the driveway. Number 2, William mumbled into the pillow. More doors and running water and some whispering in the halls, and then the big house went quiet. He let a little more time go by, just to be on the safe side, and then got very quietly out of bed. Come on, Bear. Let's go upstairs and get that knight out of his box. He pulled his reading flashlight out of the drawer in his bedside table and crept down the hall with Bear tucked securely under his arm. And I would stop there and then ask, like, why do you think he was being secretive? Why didn't he want his parents to know about it? Did he want this to just be between him and Mrs. Phillips? And then I would resume. William knew just how far to open the attic door so that it wouldn't crack. He and Bear slipped through without a sound. He flipped on the light switch and left his flashlight at the bottom step. The castle loomed above him, a great gray shadow. He was glad he had Bear. All right, your lordship, I have come to meet you. So now, who do we think he's going to meet? I would stop and ask. William announced in a loud voice in order to cheer himself on. There was an odd, expectant feeling in the attic. He propped Bear up against his old trunk and knelt down. In the middle of the courtyard, the small box sat right where William had left it. He picked it up and opened it. In a soft bed of crumpled tissue paper lay the silver knight. He carried a shield decorated with a cross in one corner and a small carved figure of a lion in the other. William noticed the sword was missing from the knight's scabbard, which is like where you would put your sword if you were a knight. So I would also stop there, and that's a vocab word, so I would have the kids tell me what that meant. Although his dagger was in place on his right hip. His right hand was raised with a clenched fist, as if he were challenging some unseen enemy. After studying him for a moment, William picked him up. To his amazement, the figure felt soft and wrinkled and warm, and it moved. William screamed and dropped it. With a tiny clanking noise, the knight fell back down onto the courtyard. William grabbed Bear and pounded down the steps. He stopped outside the attic door. He couldn't really be alive. I must have imagined it, he said as he tightened his hold on Bear. He opened the door again and peered up the stairs. There was no sound. Come on, he said. I'm not going to be scared by a lead knight who's 2 inches high. With that pronounced, he marched back up the stairs and peered over the wall of the castle. The knight was still laying on the ground where William had dropped him. William gave him a little push with his finger. The man's tiny arm fell across his chest. He really is alive, William thought. Are you all right? He asked. He watched as the small man rolled slowly over on to his side, then pushed himself up into a sitting position. He pulled the metal helmet off his head and set it down carefully beside him, reading the red plume with his fingers. At last he looked up with very great distance to William. When he opened his mouth to speak, William leaned down to listen. He asked a question in what must have been his normal voice, but William couldn't understand him. "Say it again, a little louder, please," William called. The man covered his ears with his hands. "Sorry, I didn't mean to shout," William said more quietly. "You talk louder and I'll talk softer, okay?" The knight tried again. "What have you done with Alistair?" he called out. His tiny voice had a croak in the courtyard. "Who's Alistair?" William whispered. And then I would stop. So now I would just talk with the students, and I would ask, one, so Miss Williams gave him this castle and this knight. Did she know that the knight would come alive? Or is the knight just like a toy, kind of like in Toy Story, that kids have, and he just comes alive sometimes and talks? And then also we would talk about, like, okay, so William now knows that this knight is alive, and this knight is asking about a character named Alistair. So we would see who this character is, and then just keep reading and figure out like what is going to be happening throughout the rest of the story.